All right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. I'm Raf Diallo, joined this week by Conor Neville. We've got an interview this week with Diane Caldwell, who has made a dream move to Manchester United, the club she has supported her entire life. She talks about going to Old Trafford as a child, and of course the women's team don't play there, but Old Trafford was where the promo shots were done after she signed, and she is clearly having the time of her life. So we discussed that and, of course, Ireland's qualification campaign. But before we get to that, Conor, you were a busy man this week. You were over at the League of Ireland launch. How did you get on there?
I was, once I managed to find the place. Yeah, you really haven't lived until you've traipsed around an underground car park in... well, it wasn't actually underground, but it traipsed around a dank car park in Clare Hall Shopping Centre, which is near Darndale. I had to ask a very kind Tesco delivery man to direct me to where the glass doors were. But I eventually found the place. And 3 hours milling around a room with a lot of League of Ireland players, League of Ireland managers, Women's National League players and managers, and Mark Scanlon, the director of the league, whose comments have already been circulated. A lot of the rest of them are subject to guild rules, so you'll understand, Raf, I have to kind of be cagey about what I let out here. I don't want my fellow hacks to be after me, as they were after Damien Duff yesterday, who, by the way, managed to skirt the media section in there at all, much to the outrage of...
he did speak to Tony O'Donoghue, of course.
It's only due to Tony's incredible charm and powers of persuasion that we have any Duffer quotes at all. Yes. But yeah, there was considerable annoyance that the setup up there, we were on the roof, and there was a glass building where I believe LOI TV and all the managers were doing, and Sportsfile were there taking photos, and the media centre was in a separate building, sort of perpendicular, and Duffer didn't deign to enter that at any point, and there was considerable annoyance at this. But you know, there was some interesting stuff there. I personally enjoyed Ollie Horgan talking about traipsing around the far-flung parts of Europe searching for players that Finn Harps can afford. So that was interesting quotes in due course, obviously.
Yeah, and some are definitely going to appear. I know you've been chatting to Tim Clancy, but of course, you can't really give too much away about that, I presume.
Yeah, Tim is looking forward to the new season. I'm not sure. He talked about James Abankwah bound for Udinese, and he talked about Owen Doyle as well, who's returning from Bolton Wanderers, and how big a coup that'll be. I mean, Pats, obviously, they lost Matty Smith to Derry. Everyone's losing everyone to Derry these days, but they have sought reinforcements. They lost Yaros, their very highly rated Liverpool loanee keeper. He's gone to Notts County for the year, but they've secured Joseph Anang from West Ham. So the league runners-up in the Cup champions should be in reasonable health for 2022.
Yeah, and given you are restricted in what you can talk about, we might discuss, you mentioned Mark Scanlon being there, of course, but it also happened to be the week, of course, when the FAI strategic plan for 2022 to 2025 was released. Quite a lot of interesting things in there, but there were a couple of things that jumped out to me, especially as someone from the regions or up in the northwest, not very far from where you're from either, but it was in regard to the third tier, the LOI, that they are discussing. Of course, the WNL, the plan is also to have a second tier there. Sligo Rovers, of course, being the 10th club now to join for this season. But in the League of Ireland, there has been a third tier before between 2008 and 2011. Of course, there was the A Championship, which didn't last long, but it was their kind of reserve teams and a few other kind of regional sides as well. But I would imagine with a third tier, there has to be scope to fill in some of the blanks on the map.
Yeah, he discussed that. I mean, he said it's still up in the air in terms of the shape of the third tier and, you know, who will be the clubs involved. But he talked about the possibility. Obviously, people were talking about reserve teams and B teams of existing League of Ireland teams. He said they could be part of the third tier, a partner club with a current club. So that was floated. And he talked as well, and significantly, about new geographical areas where clubs are already in underage leagues working towards senior football, but the first division is possibly too big a gap at this point. So I presume what he's talking about is the likes of maybe Cavan, Monaghan, or places like that, or even looking at maybe Kilkenny City are gone from the league, but that whole sort of southeast area above Wexford and Waterford, Kilkenny, Laois, that whole area, maybe even Kerry. I mean, the bizarre geographical composition of the Premier Division did come up.
Yeah, because it's basically the northwest, up from kind of Derry all the way down to Sligo, and then basically you've got the Dublin clubs really, and then of course Drogheda down to the Rock.
I mean, we've seen these sort of garish maps highlighted on social media, whereby like Longford, I believe, are the most northerly club in the First Division, and it looks almost like if you draw a diagonal line down the country from the northwest encompassing Dublin, everyone is north of that line, and then everyone south of that line is in the First Division. And it was floated that, given that the Munster clubs are struggling so much, both Cork and Waterford down in the second tier, Galway is still not getting out. Now, they may emerge this year, and they are the three fully professional clubs down there. It was suggested that focusing on a third tier might be a distraction, given that we have areas we need to attend to within the structure of the league itself in terms of the geographical shape of the existing Premier Division and First Division. But they're ploughing ahead. We'll see what shape it looks like. But he was still pretty vague about the shape of the league in terms of how many teams it'll have, 10 or 12. He didn't really specify, and he left open what sort of entities we'll see in the league, whether it'll be reserve teams or whether there'll be new geographical areas explored.
Yeah, but 2023, which is actually not that long away, given it's next year, is the date that's been given for that. But also domestically, of course, and what was discussed in the strategic plan was the ambition to move from number 40 in the association coefficient rankings to number 30, and that seemed quite ambitious. Now, that was to do that within the short space of a few years, but the Moldovan League, for example, has gone up 12 places between 2021 and 2022, so there is precedent for it. But again, you'll need a club that is getting into the Champions League group stages, and for the moment, that has never happened. Yeah,
I mean, he acknowledged, that target was sort of widely derided as very fantastical and overly ambitious. He acknowledged it was pretty ambitious, and stressed that some of the areas are out of our control. But the ambition, as he said, is for teams to be regularly competing in the group stages of European competition and to be seeded throughout the early rounds. We've had teams get into the Europa League before. We obviously had Dundalk in 2016 and 2020, albeit 2020 they got there via a slightly tamer draw. 2016 was probably a better achievement in terms of beating Borisov. We had Shamrock Rovers in 2011 breaking the mold in that respect. It hasn't happened regularly. Last year was particularly disappointing, particularly Shamrock Rovers' exit. One would have thought they could have gone further. We'll see how it goes this year. He did talk about not having the League Cup being an advantage to our push for European places. And, the League Cup isn't coming back this year. They were talking about the World Cup consideration at the end of the year, and the league finished late for COVID last year. They haven't brought back the League Cup this year, but they are open to reassessing that. He pointed that as something that could allow the European qualified teams to give them more space to compete well in Europe. And
you did write a piece about the 2030 World Cup bid, which of course would involve the 5 associations, including the FAI. That is, of course, not happening, and focus has turned to Euro 2028. It seems that is probably it's the most realistic.
It looks likely to. I mean, insofar as it was discussed yesterday, a lot of the discussion was about concern that it would detract from more immediate matters in terms that need attention in Irish football. Some agreed with that position, some didn't. I mean, Derry City's Rory Higgins was very open to the idea of Euro 2028. He thought it was overdue, and he didn't think it would detract from what's needed here. It looks like Euro 2028 is a sure thing. I mean, that has probably less to do with Ireland than it has to do with England, and they'll be carrying the bulk of the bid. I mean, UEFA, in the wake of the pandemic, need money, of course, and this is a guaranteed money spinner taking it to England. I would expect I would expect a bid to win, although we've had rude shocks before. I mean, there was a lot of blithe confidence, hard to believe now, about Euro 2008 and how the Celtic Soul Brothers bid between Scotland and Ireland. How could that possibly be beaten? Even though we didn't technically have a stadium aside from Lansdowne Road, which was in quite a shabby state at that point. Famously in 2002, September 2002, the UEFA officials were taken on a tour of Croke Park, which didn't allow soccer at the time, and a field in Abbottstown, which, was to allow soccer, but was a field and has, but we got a rude shock that time. I believe Emmett Malone told me once that when the Austria and Switzerland bid went in, they engaged in some negative campaigning about the Scotland-Ireland bid, pointing out that the Scotland-Ireland bid consisted of one city, Glasgow, which had 3 stadiums, which was to be discouraged, and another city which had no stadiums, which was Dublin, needless to say. We also had the Rugby World Cup bid, which, again, more blithe confidence, which we got a rude awakening for when we learned that several of our GA stadiums, the Wi-Fi was a bit too spotty for the World Rugby's liking. So, who knows? But I mean, it would appear that the stars are aligning for this bid. There's a lot of political jockeying, and the mere fact that they abandoned the World Cup 2030 bid in pursuit of this suggests there was some, pointers or hints that emerged in the sort of internal politicking sphere, which suggested this should win.
Yeah, and also given the nature of the number of stadiums that will be needed, as you said, England will provide the bulk of it. There's not that much pressure on from an Irish FAI point of view in terms of providing stadiums. There's the 2 in Dublin, and that probably would be enough.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I presume Croke Park is going to be included as part of the bid.
Yeah, with that assumption, yes.
Yeah, and obviously Hill 16 presumably will have to be filled in, but that's been done before when the Irish football team played there between 07 and 10. So, yeah, I mean, they'll have 2 stadiums to kick in. An interesting dimension to it is Northern Ireland positioning in the bid, because they don't have a stadium that meets the stated minimum criteria. I don't know whether Windsor Park is going to be upgraded.
I think Casement Park, is the one being discussed, possibly is the one that will actually be used if it happens. But again, we're a few years away from that. But there's other things to discuss, of course. Anthony Barry, Roy Keane, which is now a non-story. But before that, we'll bring you the interview.
Still Roy Keane, though. He's never a non-story, Raf.
Of course. He does get mentioned in our interview with Diane Caldwell. First thing I asked her was how long the Manchester United move was in the works.
Thanks, Raf. Yeah, I've been in contact with United since November. And then obviously they needed defensive reinforcements. So, then it was all done obviously a little bit late in the end. But done before deadline day. And that was the most important thing.
Yeah, and you've had an opportunity to be part of a couple of match day squads now in the FA Cup. Like, how has that been? Obviously, going in with the Manchester United kit and everything else, and kind of just being there before you get the opportunity to actually get some game time, hopefully very soon.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's all happening very quickly because there's so many games. There's 3 games in my first week here, so it's all a little bit surreal still, and I've had very little training, to be fair. A lot of trainings have been just match day -1 or match day -2 sessions. So really thrown into it straight away, but it's a great experience. And like you said, to be involved in the match day squad straight away, it's really good. And just to be thrown into it straight away, it's a good experience.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in the press releases and everything, at the time the move was announced, this is a dream move for you. I mean, you grew up as a Manchester United fan. So how special has this last couple of weeks been? Given as we can see, like you have the kind of training kit and stuff on, you've got the badge there, and I imagine if you're thinking back to the childhood version of yourself, it's kind of unimaginable.
It is kind of unimaginable, it really is hard to put into words because, like you said, as a child, it was just always my dream. And you get to certain points in your career where you think maybe it won't happen, and the women's team wasn't even in existence until the last couple of years. And it was something maybe that I thought, okay, it might never happen. But even if they had a team in an unprofessional league, amateur level, I still think I would have tried to come over here at some point and just to represent that badge and play. So the fact that they then did create a professional team, it was just obviously an ambition of mine to try to get over here. And I had always tried to push a move and been in contact with the previous coaches and management. But it's not easy, and a lot of variables have to fall into place. So I was lucky that everything happened this time around.
Yeah, and the stars aligned. I mean, when you go back to your childhood, would you have kind of gone over to Old Trafford or anything like that when you were younger?
Yeah. So my first experience was when I was 8 years old, and we were traveling as a family through England, and my dad took the family to Old Trafford, and we did a tour of the stadium and got pictures. So I was around 8 then. And then I had my first game when I was 11, experienced that. And it was just, a really memorable experience. Like I remember vividly, we were behind the goal in the East Stand, and we were probably like one of the last to leave, and like all the stewards were like trying to get us to leave. And my dad was going up ahead of me down the steps. And I remember vividly just turning back to take one last look and, thinking to myself as an 11-year-old, like, you'll play there one day. And I probably didn't really realize how at that time, but that was always in my mind. And again, like an ambition that I had to play on that field.
Yeah, and in terms of people you would have looked up to, obviously, as you said, the women's team didn't really exist at the time when you were growing up. What was it? The usual kind of suspects in terms of the Irish lads like Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin, etc.
Yeah, of course. Manchester United has a rich legacy of Irish legends that have represented this club. So, of course, Roy Keane was my hero, and I absolutely idolised him growing up and had his posters definitely on my wall.
Good stuff. Of course, other than the excitement of it being kind of important to you because of the fact you've supported the club your entire life, you're joining a club that is challenging for things and is up in the upper echelons of the Women's Super League. That must be a bit of a driver as well, that there could potentially be trophies either towards the end of this season or maybe beyond that.
Yeah, of course. And that's attractive for every player now. Every player wants to be playing at the highest level and playing for the biggest trophies and competitions. So of course that's a major plus point, and hopefully we can continue on the good run of form that we're currently on and hopefully achieve something at the end of the season.
Yeah, and in regards to your role at centre back, in conversations with Mark Skinner so far, has he kind of given you an indication like how you're going to be used and I suppose style of play and everything else?
Yeah, we still have to kind of go through like little bits and details of style of play. Obviously, like I said, I've been thrown into it, and it's been fast and furious, a lot of games. So I need a bit more experience and time to gel into the team and a little bit more trainings under my belt. But I'm here to help the team in any way that I can, and obviously reinforce the defence and work hard every day in training and try to prove to Mark what I can offer and bring to this team.
Yeah, and you're obviously arriving from a season with North Carolina, where, of course, you were over there with Denise O'Sullivan, who I think, if I recall, the last press conference I was on that you were also on, she had promised to be sort of a mammy figure as you were sort of arriving. Did that kind of come to pass?
Yeah, she did. She looked after me a lot, and it was great having an Irish teammate that I, had to play with. I never had that before in my career, so that was really special and just helped even, with all the traveling that we had to do. You do it together, and it makes it that little bit more easier and more enjoyable. But it was great to have Denise as a teammate at club level as well as country.
Yeah, and that season in the NWSL, how did you find it? You played 7 league games in the end across that season, but just in terms of how you found the adaptation, because of course I know you were over in America before in the college game, but obviously it's a different thing than moving into the professional division.
Yeah, the league is ferocious. It's such a high-paced game. It's so physical. And it's very transitional, so it was a lot to get used to. Very different to the European game and different style of play, but it was definitely an experience and one that I learned a lot from. Obviously, it was turbulent. Let's be honest. There's a lot of off the field issues across the whole league, which again, you just take it as a learning experience and something that I'm really grateful for experiencing.
Yeah, and in regards to adaptation. As I said, you had been to the US, of course, as a college player, and you were kind of moving there a little bit older, so you kind of knew the country a bit. But you've been sort of around Europe as well, from Iceland to Germany to Norway. As you get older, do you find that that change of environment, that constant change of environment, is it easier to adapt to as you get older, or is it still a case that maybe regardless of what age you are, it can still be a little bit difficult, that first week or two in a new country or at a new club?
Yeah, I think it definitely gets easier the more experience you have of doing it. You're always putting yourself out of your comfort zone and obviously pushing and challenging yourself and changing your environment. The biggest thing I find that helps is just having a good team around you and good teammates. And I must say that transition into this club in particular has been so easy and so smooth for myself because of the staff, because of the players. They've been so welcoming and very warm to me. So that also makes the transitions easier, as well as your experience of doing it in the past.
Yeah, and geographically, is it a little bit easier also for family to get over, because you've been much further away, of course, over in Germany, and then obviously the US during a pandemic as well probably makes it even more difficult. But the fact that Manchester is only an hour's flight, or probably even less, it must be easier to get your folks over.
Definitely, my sisters are great. They always try to travel and follow me around no matter where I am in the world. But definitely my parents were like, can you not just play a little bit closer to home so we can come and support you a bit more? So not going to be any more excuses for them now. So they're going to have to get over to Manchester. And I think they're all really excited to get over. And obviously now the travel bans have all been lifted. So yeah, hopefully it'll be a nice season ahead for them.
Yeah, and of course they would have been able to see you multiple times playing for Ireland, especially here in Tala in particular. And last year was sort of a year where it kind of built slowly and ended on a really high note, obviously with the 11-0 win over Georgia. But I suppose the first half of the year with those kind of friendly matches, and they were chosen deliberately, obviously, to give you a good test ahead of the World Cup qualifiers. I was chatting to Courtney Brosnan, your teammate, kind of about that dynamic where you're choosing difficult opponents to play. Obviously, that can have a knock-on effect on results, but at the same time, you're trying to balance confidence with good preparation. Like, was it difficult in terms, or was it something where you were able to kind of cast the results aside because you're looking at that kind of long-term goal?
Yeah, obviously, we were looking at the bigger picture and wanting to test ourselves against those really strong nations in which we will have to face. Let's be honest, if we're looking to qualify, we're going to have to beat those high-seeded teams. So again, it was more of kind of a learning process for us. I know a lot of people could argue, well, we need to become better of beating the lower seeded teams and being able to really dominate the lower seeded teams, because we obviously struggled to get goals against them. And as you could see, the Slovakia result was testament to that. But then again, Georgia was a good step forward because we actually really punished the team and scored a lot of goals, which is not typically our style. So that was a good step forward. And again, it was all learning against those top teams as well.
Yeah, and of course there would be lessons from the European Championship qualifying campaigns, which obviously started well and unfortunately just pipped by Ukraine. What lessons are you taking from that one in particular, now that you're at the halfway point of the World Cup one, that you feel you can do differently this time to get over the line?
Well, I mean, I hope we can take lessons from that campaign, and if there are any lessons to be taken, it'll be our game management and how to deal in those pressure situations. Again, where we're perhaps having to be the dominant team and possess and break down the opposition and turn possession into goals. So it's going to be our game management that we're going to have to really learn and take from the last campaign, and hopefully improve on that. And really our progress is going to be measured on if we can qualify.
Yeah, and for yourself in that defence as well, of course, the competition for places is just getting more fierce and fierce now. And there's Savannah McCarthy in there now, of course, Niamh Fahey, of course, Louise Quinn remains there. Of course, you're still playing in the team as well. How challenging has that been, and how beneficial has it been for you personally in terms of having that extra drive there and everyone kind of challenging for those either 2 or 3 places at centre back?
Yeah, I think we've always been really strong defensively going back the last number of years. We traditionally have very good defensive players, but I think the key now is to really focus on our attack. And like I said, convert possession and convert chances into goals, because that's been nearly kind of our problem predominantly. And again, competition for places is what you need in a squad, and it keeps everyone on their toes. But I think the big thing for the Irish team is that everyone is playing at a professional level now, and it's brought the level of the team so much forward because of individuals going abroad and playing professionally.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Obviously, April, Sweden, when you travel over there to resume the campaign. But of course, before that, yeah, you've got plenty of time at Manchester United before that. So congratulations again on the move. And we look forward to kind of seeing you playing in the WSL over the next few weeks.
Cheers, Raf. Thanks very much.
All right, so that was Diane Caldwell, Ireland defender, who is now living the dream at Manchester United. But before we go, Conor, there's other things to discuss. Anthony Barry, of course, leaving the Ireland setup, a blow for Stephen Kenny.
Yeah, a big blow. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of talk about how many, the amount of inflow and outflow from his coaching setup over the past 2 years or so. He did come up briefly in this lengthy League of Ireland launch in quotes, which can be let out, although they're quite modest. Rory Higgins, who worked with Kenny before, knows Barry quite well, played with him at Coventry, studied for his A licence together in Belfast. He described him as an outstanding young coach. But, you know, he was relatively philosophical. He pointed out that these things happen in football, and Kenny has proven very adept at sourcing coaches before recruitment in that sphere, and he said he's confident he'll find someone who can do the job. Now, Barry was heavily lauded for his role in Ireland's sort of general improvement across 2021. I know Thomas Tuchel kept him on staff at Chelsea and has called him the greatest set piece coach he's ever seen.
Yeah, there's a good piece in The Athletic about him in terms of his work in the defensive and attacking sense of the set pieces. And even at Wigan previously, he was very highly rated. And obviously the fact that Belgium are taking him on, that's another kind of sign of just how well he is rated.
Well, and as I think it's been pointed out, I mean, in that context, it's remarkable how Ireland, who were at a low ebb when he would have been brought in, managed to secure him. I mean, you know, that was quite a coup. I know people talk about when the team is organising the team's shape, he was a very vocal figure in that respect, and we've seen Ireland gravitate towards the 3-5-2 shape in recent months. He's a big loss, but I'm sure they'll secure someone else, and hopefully the knowledge he has left behind will survive in some form. You know, the inherited knowledge won't be lost from his short tenure with Ireland.
Yeah, and we will be seeing him very soon, given that Belgium is the first game back in the Aviva and friendly. So Kenny and his staff is that. You
worry the Belgians might have more info on us than. I mean, I don't know. Did they need insider info to?
They didn't need a Euro 2016. I doubt they're still the world number one team.
Increases their chances even more.
Yeah, but before we go, Roy Keane, of course, the Sunderland not happening, as has been confirmed. So the intriguing thing about it, whether it was going to happen or not, was I still don't have a sense of how he would set up a team or what a Roy Keane philosophy would look like.
Well, the Roy Keane philosophy, it's slightly, you wouldn't get snippets of it from his Sky Sports punditry over the years, the viral snippets that have come out. It mainly, his first port of call when any team is misfiring is to assume that they're not running around enough, or they're generally of low moral character. So I don't know what his tactical sense of the game is. Yeah, you wouldn't be apparent from his punditry. I suppose it's hard to see where he gets in now, because his punditry is quite retro, and I'm not sure it would appeal to many of the more forward-thinking clubs around the place. It seemed to me Sunderland were inclined to go for him on the basis of his record there, which was quite good at the time.
Yeah, and that is forgotten.
Forgotten that he did. I know he had a reasonable financial backing at the time, but they they had a terrible start to that season in the Championship, 2006, 2007. Now, I know there was upheaval in the background, but he did pull it together well, and they roared to that title, really, finished it very well. I think they won 5-0 in the last game to secure
it was a sensational season. And then the second season's even harder because, of course, it's about survival, and they managed to do that.
They managed to do that, yeah. There was a sense at the time that they should have been doing better, not least from Keane himself, and from sort of the general consensus was they were underperforming. I wonder, in retrospect, was that overly ambitious? Because they haven't really they failed to flower into something much better after Keane departed.
No,
I know they remained in the Premier League for many years afterwards, but never scaled any heights. I mean, Keane wasn't. They certainly weren't bound for relegation automatically if Keane had remained there. I mean, I think towards the very end of his tenure, they still managed a 2-1 derby win over Newcastle, I seem to recall. So it wasn't imploding at the time. I mean, he left quite abruptly. His period at Ipswich seems to have damaged him, particularly the stories which emanated around his relationships with players and some of the barbed comments he made. He seems to be unable to resist a withering comment, which is fantastic, obviously, in a TV environment, possibly not something sports psychologists would advise, you know. And I think Gabriel Agbon-Lahore came out with some fairly...
Yeah, he was on TalkSport and was given out.
I think he called his man management 0 out of 100. That's quite a harsh rating. I don't know if I'd rate it. I mean, that's fairly definitive now. Gabby would want to look at his rating system there.
Yeah, I think Villa went down not long after that anyway, after Roy Keane had departed as well. So I don't know what that's.
Well, maybe it was the legacy of Keane's tenure there, the inherited knowledge of what it just takes to get relegated.
Well, we won't know the answer to that really, but I don't know, where does it kind of leave him as well? Because of course it's encouraging that Sunderland have kind of looked at him. Obviously, there's past history there, but maybe there are other clubs that are floating around. Maybe kind of it is known that he does want to get back into management. That's been known for a long time. So maybe there is something out there, maybe League One or Championship. Well,
it's not clear whether he rejected Sunderland or Sunderland got cold feet at the prospect of him coming back. I mean, we don't quite know that yet. I'd suggest, I mean, in the short term, I would imagine the Sky executives are toasting this latest twist in the story, given Keane's word to them in terms of viral clippage. You know, he seems to trend daily anyway. I mean, there's a lull on Twitter and Roy Keane is trending. I mean, you barely even check at this point why he's trending. It's the default situation of Irish Twitter that Roy Keane is trending.
Yeah, well, anyway, I don't think we'll be trending after this anyway. But anyway,
why?
I'm just saying. I'm very modest with these kind of things. No, it's no. Well, you will be actually, because
I'm massively overexposed. I was on the GA podcast earlier.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. We have the GA podcast and the rugby podcast as well for people if they want
to
check
gaps out. On podcasts all over the shop.
Yes, and very much lauded for it as well, obviously, as a lifesaver today. So anyway, we'll be back next week with a full League of Ireland preview as the season closes in. And also I'll be speaking to Zach Albuzetti very soon. But Conor, thanks for joining us, and we'll be back very soon.